This is Pete Feenstra on Wednesday the 10th of October for GetReadyToRock.com, talking to the keyboard legend that is Keith Emerson.
Hello Pete.
Great to meet you, Keith, after all these years, and been a great fan of your music, as have all the listeners here. You've come a long way since you came up with that quote from your dad where you said you'll never make any money from music people can't sing.
Well, he's pretty much right actually, but that's why I get orchestras to play them now.
Which, of course, you've done on the new Three Fates album.
Yes.
Why did you use the same title that you used on the first album? Did that confuse people slightly, that suite that you did?
Not really, it's not used in the same
Context, yeah.
context, mainly because it's three of us. It's myself, Mark Lanier, and Keith Emerson, who's the conductor, and we all contributed it. You know, I don't really view it as being primarily my solo album, although I take a predominant role in the making of the album by means of doing all the compositions for most of them.
Yeah.
Although Mark Lanier wrote some pieces, great pieces as well. So, but you know, working with orchestras has always been a love of mine ever since the 60s. Yes, absolutely. When I did the Five Bridges Suite, and
would I be right in saying the Five Bridges Suite was probably the first major classical piece that a rock band undertook? I think it was before John.
Well, it was
actually did his thing, wasn't it?
Yes. Well, John, the late John, Lord bless him. You know, he did his concerto for group and orchestra, and it's around about the same time that I wrote the Five Bridges Suite and recorded that. However, John did his at the Royal Album Hall, conducted by Malcolm Arnold, Sir Malcolm Arnold, and I recorded mine at Fairfield Hall, Croydon. But no, I won't forget that. But the object still came out wonderfully well. I was very pleased with the Five Bridges.
As you should be with this new album, of course.
Well, yes. Well, having had experience, you see, back then in the 60s, orchestras were very difficult to work with if you introduced any electronic instrument.
Like a Moog synthesizer, I suppose.
They hated that to the extent that I was almost banned from the British Musicians Union.
Music one.
Yes, because it's, you know, somehow somebody got around that I may have said, or somebody else said that you know, it can take the place of any member of the orchestra, which is completely stupid, really. And they said, oh no, we don't need it.
But having gone to this, what is essentially an orchestral project, you're still using the Moog as an integral part of the music, which is
well, I think so. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to define what has now become known as prog rock, then I think the Moog synthesizer defines that sound
and that era,
and that particular era. Yeah, and the style, of course, which was very eclectic. You know, eclectic.
So was Terry Mickelson, thinking about him, and we'll talk about how you met him in a moment, but was he a kind of conduit between yourself as a rock band and the Munich radio?
Yeah, he's kind of like he's got a rock star personality, and which is infectious, and most of all it strikes the orchestra, and he gets the most out of them. And of course you've got to realise that it is so different than in the 60s, where orchestras back then were a bit reluctant to work with anybody that, you know, even played an electronic instrument. It was just a really, really
there was a big divide, but thinking about that, you've been responsible with both yourself and with ELP of dragging over the rock audience, if that's the right word, to classical music. Would you say that this project, after all these years, finally cracks the thing about dragging over people who like orchestral music and classical music to a rock band or a rock band composition?
Well, I wouldn't say dragging them over. It's a logical progression in music, regardless of whether, you know, it's jazz, classical, or folk, or whatever.
There's a drink coming over here for Keith.
No, that's not important.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there was always been that divide, wasn't there, before, as you just outlined? I mean,
but it's all becoming one thing now, and that's the greatest thing, because a lot of the orchestral players, are kind of fresh out of music school, and of course they know about rock bands, and it's great fun for them. I mean, they look for a challenge now.
Yeah.
You know, like rather than I suppose they can play Beethoven's Fifth without even watching a conductor. So you know, they want this challenge, and they like getting involved with new instrumentations, and I see nothing wrong if those new instruments which they're involved in are electronic. Yes, they are louder, but there is a way of coping with that, so it makes it bearable for them to play with. You know,
your personal history, I guess, goes right back to just latching on the idea of the instrumentation and the sounds. You go, I guess, you go right back to the Hammond organ. Back in the 60s,
pretty much so.
And the pursuit of different sounds and dramatic sounds which you carried through your career, all the way through to the Moog synthesizer that we just talked about.
Yes, well, my first instrument was the piano.
Right.
And but you know, when you're playing with a guitar player and they go to crank it up to number 11, you just aren't heard. So me and my contemporaries, such as Rick Wakeman, we had the same problems.
So the whole idea of the showmanship that you later brought into ELP, that was the equivalent to the guitar player's stuff.
Pretty much, yes, pretty much. You know, I've always felt that you know, if you're going to write such in-depth, challenging music, not just for the mere sake that it's clever. I mean, all of my compositions have been painstakingly thought out and written down on manuscript paper. So it's not just been a question of a lot of my music. I've composed it, I've written it down, and then I've had to practice it afterwards. So which I still do.
And thinking about that, and thinking particularly about Tarkus, I mean, with this project, with the orchestra and everything else, you would have gone to the score. Would you then interpret it as it was done originally, or did you bring anything new to that at that point?
Well, after I'd written Tarkus, I knew that it was a piece of importance, and I transcribed it for piano.
Yeah.
So, which was a great help when I was collaborating with arrangers that put the arranger.
Yes, quite so. Yeah.
You know, so you know, which actually with all of the pieces on the Three Fates album, they are from solo piano pieces which I've written and transcribed. So the orchestrations came from that.
But the sonic quality and the drama of Tarkus on this project, is that something you always wanted to bring to a recording session all those years ago?
Yes, you know, I've always had in the back of my mind, but as I said, my first experiences with orchestras wasn't very great, and I seriously doubted whether the orchestra would actually be able to do it. But it seems now that they have no problem with it.
No, that's
great. The great Japanese arranger Yoshimatsu has done a wonderful version of Tarkus, and it's been used on a Japanese historical TV drama, and which is still playing in Japan.
You've also said that this album is for the listener rather than for a label. Again, that must be a reference to what I call this immense sonic quality. I mean, I can't remember a record where an orchestra has captured a piece of music, not specifically or originally written for them, in such a not bombastic and intuitive way, really.
Well, no, it's.
They did seem to be up for it, which is what you're talking about.
They're absolutely wonderful, you know, and they contributed, you know, way beyond my, you know, deepest expectations, and particularly the new pieces which I've written coming out really wonderfully well, and to the extent the orchestra came into the control room to hear back what they'd done, and made suggestions of. They were completely right into it. Great.
So you've revisited Endless Enigma, Part 1 and 2, Fanfare for the Common Man.
Balance Bolero.
Yes, which is another really interesting
Yes.
piece, the way you've done it on there. It's got its own dynamic. I think it's
Yeah.
great. Were they the pieces that work best, you think, for that kind of setting that you worked in now?
As a start, I mean, there's no reason now that I've been sort of very much encouraged by this, that orchestras have said, do some more,
Yeah.
which I've started doing. So it's great to, I remember the great maestro Aaron Copland describing the feeling he got when he heard his first orchestral piece being played, and he was late to get into the hall, and it was snowing or something in New York, and he ploughed through the snow, and he got there and walked in, and the orchestra had already struck up playing his piece. He said he could not believe the feeling that there were about 70 people there on stage with instruments, all playing his music, and he said that was the most amazing moment, and I can quite see that.
Just talking about the orchestra who he took on the road with ELP many years ago, and they ended up willing to play for free, which is an incredible commitment to your music, I guess, and the fact that they must have enjoyed it.
They did enjoy it, yes, and they were in tears actually, but there was just no way.
Are we allowed to say which orchestra that was?
Well, it was a hand-picked orchestra.
Yeah, okay.
Our conductor Godfrey Salmon, auditioned all the guys and girls, and we didn't actually give it a name, but I think in retrospect, if we'd have kept them on, just touring on their own, I think it would have been a very good project. They could have gone out as the ELP orchestra, so right on their own without ELP.
Yeah.
And ELP could have gone out as ELP, and to finance it, I think that
leaping back in time and going back to the Nice and the Five Bridges thing, did you ever meet Leonard Bernstein?
Yes.
And what was his take on the whole thing? Did he appreciate it? Or?
Well, the Leonard Bernstein story goes back to when I met him in Paris around about 1977.
Right.
And it's a very funny story. I think I drove my motorcycle to where he was performing, and I met him after the concert, and I think he kind of recalled who I was, but he said, "Oh, you must come to have dinner with us tonight." Where? He gave me the address of some place in Paris. So I went there with my manager, and so I got to meet him, and he was a bit sarcastic towards me. He sort of announced to everybody at the dinner, "Oh, we have Mr. Emerson over here, he's written a piano concerto. How many movements does your piano concerto have?" And I said, "Well, actually 3 movements." "Hey, 3 movements, everyone." So it was kind of a ridicule. So I said, "Yeah, well, we're going to be mixing everything in the studio tomorrow, why don't you come down?" Gave him the address, never thinking he'd take up my offer. Came down, walked in, and Greg Blake was smoking a joint and with his feet up on the table, and said, "That's a good start." And casually said to Leonard Bernstein, "Hi Lenny baby, how they hanging?" So that was
that was the end of the beautiful relationship.
Well, no, he was alright, he listened to everything, and he kind of admired it. So, yes, I did meet him. He said he liked my leathers. That was,
going back to when you first put ELP together, you didn't actually reveal your classical sources. I suppose you were so far ahead of the rock audience at the time, but Toccata and things like this.
No, I think I'd already I quoted from the classics a lot in improvisations during when I had the Nice in the 60s. So. But I regard myself. I'm not a classical pianist. Although I do play classical music.
Right, sorry.
I'm not a jazz pianist, but I do play some jazz piano. So when you put all these things together, it comes out as like what I do.
The Mark Bonald track on the album, American Matador,
Yes.
goes back to his solo album, 1993.
Yes.
Did you feel that fitted in with the rest of the material on the record? How did that come?
Yes, I do, because it was different aspects of each of the three of us.
Right.
Personally, I would have liked it if Mark had played it acoustically.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So a lot of apart from the Moog synthesizer, was acoustic.
Yeah.
So,
Well, the rest of the project flows, works so well. As I said, the sonic quality is unbelievable. I think it's a career high for you.
Yes.
I'm hoping it's going to drag a different audience to the project, and which previously had a very good go at. I think this might be the one. This has been Pete Feenstra. Get ready to rock. Great talking to you, Keith.
thank you. Likewise.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Jake, on the camera. And good afternoon.